Economics. From Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. This article is about the social science. For other uses, see Economics, Disambiguation, and Economic Theory, Journal. For a topical guide to this subject, see Outline of Economics. Economics. World GDP, PPP, per capita by country. World GDP, PPP, per capita by country, 2014. Index Outline Category. History Types Classification. History of Economics. Economic History, Academic Study. Schools of Economics. Microeconomics, Macroeconomics, Heterodox Economics, Methodology, JEL, Classification Codes. Concepts, Theory, Techniques. Econometrics, Economic Growth, Economic System, Experimental Economics, Mathematical Economics, Game Theory, Market, National Accounting. By application. Agricultural, behavioral, business, computational, cultural, demographic, development, digitization, ecological, education, environmental, evolutionary, expeditionary, geography, health, industrial, organization, information, international, labor law, managerial, monetary / financial, natural resource, personnel, public / welfare, economics, regional, rural, urban welfare. Lists. Economists. Publications, journals. Portal icon, Business and Economics Portal. VTE. Economics is the social science that seeks to describe the factors which determine the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. The term economics comes from the ancient Greek, from oikos, house, and nomos, custom, or law, hence rules of the household for good management. One political economy was the earlier name for the subject, but economists in the late 19th century suggested economics as a shorter term for economic science to establish itself as a separate discipline outside of political science and other social sciences too. Economics focuses on the behavior and interactions of economic agents and how economies work. Consistent with this focus, primary textbooks often distinguished between microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics examines the behavior of basic elements in the economy, including individual agents and markets, their interactions, and the outcomes of interactions. Individual agents may include, for example, households, firms, buyers, and sellers. Macroeconomics analyzes the entire economy, meaning aggregated production, consumption, savings, and investment, and issues affecting it, including unemployment of resources, labor, capital, and land, inflation, economic growth, and the public policies that address these issues, monetary, fiscal, and other policies. Other broad distinctions within economics include those between positive economics, describing what is, and normative economics, advocating what ought to be, between economic theory and applied economics, between rational and behavioral economics, and between mainstream economics, more orthodox, and dealing with the rationality individualism equilibrium nexus, and heterodox economics, more radical, and dealing with the institutions history social structure nexus 3-4. Besides the traditional concern in production, distribution, and consumption, in an economy, economic analysis may be applied throughout society, as in business, finance, healthcare, and government. Economic analysis may also be applied to such diverse subjects as crime, 5 education, 6 the family, law, politics, religion, 7 social institutions, war, 8 science, 9, and the environment. 10 education, for example, requires time, effort, and expenses, plus the foregone income and experience, yet these losses can be weighted against future benefits education may bring to the agent, or the economy. At the turn of the 21st century, the expanding domain of economics in the social sciences has been described as economic imperialism. 11. Countries by real GDP growth rate in 2014. Countries in red were in recession. The ultimate goal of economics is to improve the living conditions of people in their everyday life. 12. Contents. 1. Definitions. 2. Microeconomics. 2.1 Markets. 2.2 Production, Cost, and Efficiency. 2.3 Specialization. 2.4 Supply and Demand. 2.5 Firms. 2.6 Uncertainty and Game Theory. 2.7 Market Failure. 2.8 Public Sector. 3 Macroeconomics. 3.1 Growth. 3.2 Business cycle. 3.3 Unemployment. 3.4 Inflation and monetary policy. 3.5 Fiscal policy. 4 International economics. 5 Practice. 5.1 Theory. 5.2 Empirical investigation. 5.3 Profession. 6 Related subjects. 7 History. 7.1 Classical political economy. 7.2 Marxism. 7.3 Neoclassical economics. 7.4 Keynesian economics. 7.5 Chicago School of Economics. 7.6 Other schools and approaches. 8 Agreements. 9 Criticisms. 9.1 General criticisms. 9.2 Criticisms of assumptions. 10 See also. 11 References. 12 Further reading. 13 External links. Definitions. A map of world economies by size of GDP, nominal, in USD, World Bank, 2014 period 13. There are a variety of modern definitions of economics. Some of the differences may reflect evolving views of the subject or different views among economists. 14 Scottish philosopher Adam Smith, 1776, defined what was then called political economy as an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, in particular, as a branch of the science of a statesman or legislator, with the twofold objectives of providing a plentiful revenue or subsistence for the people, and to supply the state or commonwealth with the revenue for the public services. 15. J.B. Say, 1803, distinguishing the subject from its public policy uses, defines it as the science of production, distribution, and consumption of wealth. 16. On the satirical side, Thomas Carlyle, 1849, coined the dismal science as an epithet for classical economics, in this context, commonly linked to the pessimistic analysis of Malthus, 1798. 17. John Stuart Mill, 1844, defines the subject in a social context as the science which traces the laws of such of the phenomena of society as arise from the combined operations of mankind for the production of wealth, insofar as those phenomena are not modified by the pursuit of any other object. 18. Alfred Marshall provides a still widely cited definition in his textbook Principles of Economics, 1890, that extends analysis beyond wealth and from the societal to the microeconomic level. Economics is a study of man in the ordinary business of life. It inquires how he gets his income and how he uses it. Thus, it is on the one side, the study of wealth, and on the other and more important side, a part of the study of man. 19. Lionel Robbins, 1932, developed implications of what has been termed perhaps the most commonly accepted current definition of the subject. 20. Economics is a science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. 21. Robbins describes the definition as not classificatory in picking out certain kinds of behavior, but rather analytical in focusing attention on a particular aspect of behavior, the form imposed by the influence of scarcity. 22. He affirmed that previous economists have usually centered their studies on the analysis of wealth, how wealth is created, production, distributed, and consumed, and how wealth can grow. 23. But he said that economics can be used to study other things, such as war, that are outside its usual focus. This is because war has, as the goal, winning it, as a sought-after end, generates both cost and benefits, and resources, human life, and other costs, are used to attain the goal. If the war is not winnable, or if the expected costs outweigh the benefits, the deciding actors, assuming they are rational, may never go to war, a decision, but rather explore other alternatives. We cannot define economics as the science that studies wealth, war, crime, education, and any other field economic analysis can be applied to, but as the science that studies a particular common aspect of each of those subjects. They all use scarce resources to attain a sought-after end. Some subsequent comments criticized the definition as overly broad in failing to limit its subject matter to analysis of markets. From the 1960s, however, such comments abated as the economic theory of maximizing behavior and rational choice modeling expanded the domain of the subject to areas previously treated in other fields. 24. There are other criticisms as well, such as in scarcity not accounting for the macroeconomics of high unemployment. 25. Gary Becker, a contributor to the expansion of economics into new areas, describes the approach he favors as combining the assumptions of maximizing behavior, stable preferences, and market equilibrium, used relentlessly and unflinchingly. 26.1 commentary characterizes the remark as making economics an approach rather than a subject matter, but with great specificity as to the choice process and the type of social interaction that such analysis involves. The same source reviews a range of definitions included in Principles of Economics textbooks, and concludes that the lack of agreement need not affect the subject matter that the texts treat. Among economists more generally, it argues that a particular definition presented may reflect the direction toward which the author believes economics is evolving, or should evolve. 27. Microeconomics. Main article, Microeconomics. Markets. Main article, Markets. A vegetable vendor in a marketplace. Economists study trade, production, and consumption decisions, such as those that occur in a traditional marketplace. Two men sit at computer monitors, with financial information. In virtual markets, buyer and seller are not present and trade via intermediates and electronic information. Pictured, São Paulo Stock Exchange, Brazil. Microeconomics examines how entities, forming a market structure, interact within a market to create a market system. These entities include private and public players with various classifications, typically operating under scarcity of trade of the units and government regulation. The item traded may be a tangible product such as apples, or a service such as repair services, legal counsel, or entertainment. In theory, in a free market the aggregate sum of quantity demanded by buyers and quantity supplied by sellers will be equal, and reach economic equilibrium over time in reaction to price changes. In practice, various issues may prevent equilibrium, and any equilibrium reached may not necessarily be morally equitable. For example, if the supply of healthcare services is limited by external factors, the equilibrium price may be unaffordable for many who desire it, but cannot pay for it. Various market structures exist. In perfectly competitive markets, no participants are large enough to have the market power to set the price of a homogeneous product. In other words, every participant is a price taker, as no participant influences the price of a product. In the real world, markets often experience imperfect competition. Forms include monopoly, in which there is only one seller of a good, duopoly, in which there are only two sellers of a good, oligopoly, in which there are few sellers of a good, monopolistic competition, in which there are many sellers producing highly differentiated goods, monopsony, in which there is only one buyer of a good, and oligopsony, in which there are few buyers of a good. Unlike perfect competition, imperfect competition invariably means market power is unequally distributed. Firms under imperfect competition have the potential to be price makers, which means that, by holding a disproportionately high share of market power, they can influence the prices of their products. Microeconomics studies individual markets by simplifying the economic system, by assuming that activity in the market being analyzed does not affect other markets. This method of analysis is known as partial equilibrium analysis, supply and demand. This method aggregates the sum of all activity in only one market. General equilibrium theory studies various markets and their behavior. It aggregates the sum of all activity across all markets. This method studies both changes in markets and their interactions leading towards equilibrium. 28. Production, cost, and efficiency. Main articles, Production Theory Basics, Opportunity Cost, Economic Efficiency, and Production Possibility Frontier. In microeconomics, production is the conversion of inputs into outputs. It is an economic process that uses inputs to create a commodity or a service for exchange or direct use. Production is a flow and thus a rate of output per period of time. Distinctions include such production alternatives as for consumption, food, haircuts, etc., versus investment goods, new tractors, buildings, roads, etc., public goods, national defense, smallpox vaccinations, etc., or private goods, new computers, bananas, etc., and guns versus butter. Opportunity cost refers to the economic cost of production, the value of the next best opportunity foregone. Choices must be made between desirable yet mutually exclusive actions. it has been described as expressing the basic relationship between scarcity and choice. 29. The opportunity cost of an activity is an element in ensuring that scarce resources are used efficiently, such that the cost is weighed against the value of that activity, in deciding on more or less of it. Opportunity costs are not restricted to monetary or financial costs, but could be measured by the real cost of output foregone, leisure, or anything else that provides the alternative benefit, utility. 30. Inputs used in the production process include such primary factors of production as labor, services, capital, durable produced goods used in production, such as an existing factory, and land, including natural resources. Other inputs may include intermediate goods used in production of final goods, such as the steel in a new car. Economic efficiency describes how well a system generates desired output with the given set of inputs and available technology. Efficiency is improved if more output is generated without changing inputs, or in other words, the amount of waste is reduced. A widely accepted general standard is Pareto efficiency, which is reached when no further change can make someone better off without making someone else worse off. An example: production possibility frontier, with illustrative points marked. The production possibility frontier, PPF, is an expository figure for representing scarcity, cost, and efficiency. In the simplest case, an economy can produce just two goods, say guns and butter. The PPF is a table or graph, as at the right, showing the different quantity combinations of the two goods producible with the given technology, and total factor inputs, which limit feasible total output. Each point on the curve shows potential total output for the economy, which is the maximum feasible output of one good, given a feasible output quantity of the other good. Scarcity is represented in the figure by people being willing but unable in the aggregate to consume beyond the PPF, such as at X, and by the negative slope of the curve. 31. If production of one good increases along the curve, production of the other good decreases, an inverse relationship. This is because increasing output of one good requires transferring inputs to it from production of the other good, decreasing the latter. The slope of the curve at a point on it gives the trade-off between the two goods. It measures what an additional unit of one good costs in units foregone of the other good, an example of a real opportunity cost. Thus, if one more gun costs 100 units of butter, the opportunity cost of one gun is 100 butter. Along the PPF, scarcity implies that using more of one good in the aggregate entails doing with less of the other good. Still, in a market economy, movement along the curve may indicate that the choice of the increased output is anticipated to be worth the cost to the agents. By construction, each point on the curve shows productive efficiency in maximizing output for given total inputs. A point inside the curve, as at A, is feasible, but represents production inefficiency, wasteful use of inputs, in that output of one or both goods could increase by moving in a northeast direction to a point on the curve. Examples cited of such inefficiency include high unemployment during a business cycle or recession, or economic organization of a country that discourages full use of resources. Being on the curve might still not fully satisfy allocative efficiency, also called Pareto efficiency, if it does not produce a mix of goods that consumers prefer over other points. Much applied economics in public policy is concerned with determining how the efficiency of an economy can be improved. Recognizing the reality of scarcity, and then figuring out how to organize society for the most efficient use of resources has been described as the essence of economics, where the subject makes its unique contribution. 32. Specialization. Main articles: division of labor, comparative advantage and gains from trade. A map showing the main trade routes for goods within late medieval Europe. Specialization is considered key to economic efficiency based on theoretical and empirical considerations. Different individuals or nations may have different real opportunity costs of production, say from differences in stocks of human capital per worker or capital/labor ratios. According to theory, this may give a comparative advantage in production of goods that make more intensive use of the relatively more abundant, thus relatively cheaper, input. Even if one region has an absolute advantage as to the ratio of its outputs to inputs in every type of output, it may still specialize in the output in which it has a comparative advantage, and thereby gain from trading with a region that lacks any absolute advantage, but has a comparative advantage in producing something else. it has been observed that a high volume of trade occurs among regions even with access to a similar technology and mix of factor inputs, including high-income countries. This has led to investigation of economies of scale and agglomeration to explain specialization in similar but differentiated product lines, to the overall benefit of respective trading parties or regions. 33. The general theory of specialization applies to trade among individuals, firms, manufacturers, service providers, and economies. Among each of these production systems, there may be a corresponding division of labor with different work groups specializing, or correspondingly different types of capital equipment and differentiated land uses. 34. An example that combines features above is a country that specializes in the production of high-technology products, as developed countries do, and trades with developing nations for goods produced in factories, where labor is relatively cheap and plentiful, resulting in different opportunity costs of production. More total output and utility thereby results from specializing in production and trading than if each country produced its own high-tech and low-tech products. Theory and observation set out the conditions such that market prices of outputs and productive inputs select an allocation of factor inputs by comparative advantage, so that, relatively, low-cost inputs go to producing low-cost outputs. In the process, aggregate output may increase, as a byproduct, or by design. 35. Such specialization of production creates opportunities for gains from trade, whereby resource owners benefit from trade in the sale of one type of output for other, more highly valued goods. A measure of gains from trade is the increased income levels that trade may facilitate. 36. Supply and demand. Main article, supply and demand. A graph depicting quantity on the x-axis and price on the y-axis. The supply and demand model describes how prices vary as a result of a balance between product availability and demand. The graph depicts an increase, that is, right shift, in demand from D1 to D2 along with the consequent increase in price and quantity required to reach a new equilibrium point on the supply curve, S. Prices and quantities have been described as the most directly observable attributes of goods produced and exchanged in a market economy. 37. The theory of supply and demand is an organizing principle for explaining how prices coordinate the amounts produced and consumed. In Microeconomics, it applies to price and output determination for a market with perfect competition, which includes the condition of no buyers or sellers large enough to have price-setting power. For a given market of a commodity, demand is the relation of the quantity that all buyers would be prepared to purchase at each unit price of the good. Demand is often represented by a table or a graph showing price and quantity demanded, as in the figure. Demand theory describes individual consumers as rationally choosing the most preferred quantity of each good, given income, prices, tastes, etc. A term for this is constrained utility maximization with income and wealth as the constraints on demand. Here, utility refers to the hypothesized relation of each individual consumer for ranking different commodity bundles as more or less preferred. The law of demand states that, in general, price and quantity demanded in a given market are inversely related. That is, the higher the price of a product, the less of it people would be prepared to buy, other things unchanged. As the price of a commodity falls, consumers move toward it from relatively more expensive goods, the substitution effect. In addition, purchasing power from the price decline increases ability to buy, the income effect. Other factors can change demand. For example, an increase in income will shift the demand curve for a normal good outward relative to the origin, as in the figure. All determinants are predominantly taken as constant factors of demand and supply. Supply is the relation between the price of a good and the quantity available for sale at that price. It may be represented as a table or graph relating price and quantity supplied. Producers, for example business firms, are hypothesized to be profit maximizers, meaning that they attempt to produce and supply the amount of goods that will bring them the highest profit. Supply is typically represented as a function relating price and quantity if other factors are unchanged. That is, the higher the price at which the good can be sold, the more of it producers will supply, as in the figure. The higher price makes it profitable to increase production. Just as on the demand side, the position of the supply can shift, say from a change in the price of a productive input or a technical improvement. The law of supply states that, in general, a rise in price leads to an expansion in supply, and a fall in price leads to a contraction in supply. Here as well, the determinants of supply, such as price of substitutes, cost of production, technology applied, and various factors inputs of production are all taken to be constant for a specific time period of evaluation of supply. Market equilibrium occurs where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded, the intersection of the supply and demand curves, in the figure above. At a price below equilibrium, there is a shortage of quantity supplied compared to quantity demanded. This is posited to bid the price up. At a price above equilibrium, there is a surplus of quantity supplied compared to quantity demanded. This pushes the price down. The model of supply and demand predicts that for given supply and demand curves, price and quantity will stabilize at the price that makes quantity supplied equal to quantity demanded. Similarly, demand and supply theory predicts a new price-quantity combination from a shift in demand as to the figure, or in supply. For a given quantity of a consumer good, the point on the demand curve indicates the value, or marginal utility, to consumers for that unit. It measures what the consumer would be prepared to pay for that unit. 38. The corresponding point on the supply curve measures marginal cost, the increase in total cost to the supplier for the corresponding unit of the good. The price in equilibrium is determined by supply and demand. In a perfectly competitive market, supply and demand equate marginal cost and marginal utility at equilibrium. 39. On the supply side of the market, some factors of production are described as relatively variable in the short run, which affects the cost of changing output levels. Their usage rates can be changed easily, such as electrical power, raw material inputs, and overtime and temp work. Other inputs are relatively fixed, such as plant and equipment and key personnel. In the long run, all inputs may be adjusted by management. These distinctions translate to differences in the elasticity, responsiveness, of the supply curve in the short and long runs, and corresponding differences in the price-quantity change, from a shift on the supply or demand side of the market. Marginalist theory, such as above, describes the consumers as attempting to reach most preferred positions, subject to income and wealth constraints, while producers attempt to maximize profits subject to their own constraints, including demand for goods produced, technology, and the price of inputs. For the consumer, that point comes where marginal utility of a good, net of price, reaches zero, leaving no net gain from further consumption increases. Analogously, the producer compares marginal revenue, identical to price for the perfect competitor, against the marginal cost of a good, with marginal profit the difference. At the point where marginal profit reaches zero, further increases in production of the good stop. For movement to market equilibrium, and for changes in equilibrium, price and quantity also change at the margin more or less of something, rather than necessarily all, or nothing. Other applications of demand and supply include the distribution of income among the factors of production, including labor and capital, through factor markets. In a competitive labor market, for example, the quantity of labor employed and the price of labor, the wage rate, depends on the demand for labor from employers for production and supply of labor from potential workers. Labor economics examines the interaction of workers and employers through such markets to explain patterns and changes of wages and other labor income, labor mobility, and unemployment, productivity through human capital, and related public policy issues. 40. Demand and supply analysis is used to explain the behavior of perfectly competitive markets, but as a standard of comparison it can be extended to any type of market. It can also be generalized to explain variables across the economy, for example, total output, estimated as real GDP, and the general price level, as studied in Macroeconomics. 41. Tracing the qualitative and quantitative effects of variables that change supply and demand, whether in the short or long run, is a standard exercise in applied economics. Economic theory may also specify conditions such that supply and demand through the market is an efficient mechanism for allocating resources. 42. Firms. Main articles: Theory of the Firm, Industrial Organization, Business Economics, and Managerial Economics. People frequently do not trade directly on markets. Instead, on the supply side, they may work in and produce through firms. The most obvious kinds of firms are corporations, partnerships, and trusts. According to Ronald Coase, people begin to organize their production in firms when the costs of doing business becomes lower than doing it on the market. 43 firms combine labor and capital and can achieve far greater economies of scale when the average cost per unit declines as more units are produced than individual market trading. In perfectly competitive markets studied by the theory of supply and demand, there are many producers, none of which significantly influence price. Industrial organization generalizes from that special case to study the strategic behavior of firms that do have significant control of price. It considers the structure of such markets and their interactions. Common market structures studied besides perfect competition include monopolistic competition, various forms of oligopoly, and monopoly. 44. Managerial economics applies microeconomic analysis to specific decisions in business firms or other management units. It draws heavily from quantitative methods such as operations research and programming, and from statistical methods such as regression analysis, in the absence of certainty and perfect knowledge. A unifying theme is the attempt to optimize business decisions, including unit cost minimization and profit maximization, given the firm's objectives and constraints imposed by technology and market conditions. 45. Uncertainty and game theory. Main articles: Information Economics, Game Theory, and Financial Economics. Uncertainty in economics is an unknown prospect of gain or loss, whether quantifiable as risk or not. Without it, household behavior would be unaffected by uncertain employment and income prospects. Financial and capital markets would reduce to exchange of a single instrument in each market period, and there would be no communications industry. 46. Given its different forms, there are various ways of representing uncertainty and modeling economic agents' responses to it. 47. Game theory is a branch of applied mathematics that considers strategic interactions between agents, one kind of uncertainty. It provides a mathematical foundation of industrial organization, discussed above, to model different types of firm behavior, for example in an oligopolistic industry, few sellers, but equally applicable to wage negotiations, bargaining, contract design, and any situation where individual agents are few enough to have perceptible effects on each other. As a method heavily used in behavioral economics, it postulates that agents use strategies to maximize their payoffs, given the strategies of other agents with at least partially conflicting interests. 48-49. In this, it generalizes maximization approaches developed to analyze market actors such as in the supply and demand model, and allows for incomplete information of actors. The field dates from the 1944 classic theory of games and economic behavior by John von Neumann and Oskar Morgenstern. It has significant application seemingly outside of economics in such diverse subjects as formulation of nuclear strategies, ethics, political science, and evolutionary biology. 50. Risk aversion may stimulate activity that in well-functioning markets smooths out risk and communicates information about risk, as in markets for insurance, commodity futures contracts, and financial instruments. Financial economics, or simply finance, describes the allocation of financial resources. It also analyzes the pricing of financial instruments, the financial structure of companies, the efficiency and fragility of financial markets. 51. Financial crises and related government policy or regulation. 52. Some market organizations may give rise to inefficiencies associated with uncertainty. Based on George Akerlof's Market for Lemons article, the paradigm example is of a dodgy second-hand car market. Customers without knowledge of whether a car is a lemon depress its price below what a quality second-hand car would be. 53. Information asymmetry arises here if the seller has more relevant information than the buyer, but no incentive to disclose it. Related problems in insurance are adverse selection, such that those at most risk are most likely to insure, say reckless drivers, and moral hazard, such that insurance results in riskier behavior, say more reckless driving. 54. Both problems may raise insurance costs and reduce efficiency by driving otherwise willing transactors from the market, incomplete markets. Moreover, attempting to reduce one problem, say adverse selection, by mandating insurance, may add to another, say moral hazard. Information economics, which studies such problems, has relevance in subjects such as insurance, contract law, mechanism design, monetary economics, and healthcare. 54 applied subjects include market and legal remedies to spread or reduce risk, such as warranties, government-mandated partial insurance, restructuring or bankruptcy law, inspection, and regulation for quality and information disclosure. 5548. Market failure. Main articles: market failure, government failure, information economics, environmental economics, and agricultural economics. A smokestack releasing smoke. Pollution can be a simple example of market failure. If costs of production are not borne by producers, but are by the environment, accident victims, or others, then prices are distorted. The term market failure encompasses several problems which may undermine standard economic assumptions. Although economists categorize market failures differently, the following categories emerge in the main texts. 56. Information asymmetries and incomplete markets may result in economic inefficiency, but also a possibility of improving efficiency through market, legal, and regulatory remedies, as discussed above. Natural monopoly, or the overlapping concepts of practical and technical monopoly, is an extreme case of failure of competition as a restraint on producers. Extreme economies of scale are one possible cause. Public goods are goods which are undersupplied in a typical market. The defining features are that people can consume public goods without having to pay for them, and that more than one person can consume the good at the same time. Externalities occur where there are significant social costs or benefits from production or consumption that are not reflected in market prices. For example, air pollution may generate a negative externality, and education may generate a positive externality, less crime, etc. Governments soften tax and otherwise restrict the sale of goods that have negative externalities, and subsidize or otherwise promote the purchase of goods that have positive externalities in an effort to correct the price distortions caused by these externalities. 57 Elementary demand and supply theory predicts equilibrium, but not the speed of adjustment for changes of equilibrium due to a shift in demand or supply. 58. In many areas, some form of price stickiness is postulated to account for quantities, rather than prices, adjusting in the short run to changes on the demand side or the supply side. This includes standard analysis of the business cycle in macroeconomics. Analysis often revolves around causes of such price stickiness and their implications for reaching a hypothesized long-run equilibrium. Examples of such price stickiness in particular markets include wage rates in labor markets and posted prices in markets deviating from perfect competition. A woman takes samples of water from a river. Environmental scientists sampling water. Some specialized fields of economics deal in market failure more than others. The economics of the public sector is one example. Much environmental economics concerns externalities or public bads. Policy options include regulations that reflect cost-benefit analysis or market solutions that change incentives, such as emission fees or redefinition of property rights. 59. Public sector. Main articles: economics of the public sector and public finance. See also welfare economics. Public finance is the field of economics that deals with budgeting the revenues and expenditures of a public sector entity, usually government. The subject addresses such matters as tax incidence, who really pays a particular tax, cost-benefit analysis of government programs, effects on economic efficiency and income distribution of different kinds of spending and taxes, and fiscal politics. The latter, an aspect of public choice theory, models public sector behavior analogously to microeconomics, involving interactions of self-interested voters, politicians, and bureaucrats. 60. Much of economics is positive, seeking to describe and predict economic phenomena. Normative economics seeks to identify what economies ought to be like. Welfare economics is a normative branch of economics that uses microeconomic techniques to simultaneously determine the allocative efficiency within an economy and the income distribution associated with it. It attempts to measure social welfare by examining the economic activities of the individuals that comprise society. 61. Macroeconomics. The circulation of money in an economy in a macroeconomic model. Main article: Macroeconomics. Macroeconomics examines the economy as a whole to explain broad aggregates and their interactions top-down, that is, using a simplified form of general equilibrium theory. 62 such aggregates include national income and output, the unemployment rate, and price inflation, and sub-aggregates like total consumption and investment spending and their components. It also studies effects of monetary policy and fiscal policy. Since at least the 1960s, macroeconomics has been characterized by further integration as to micro-based modeling of sectors, including rationality of players, efficient use of market information, and imperfect competition. 63 This has addressed a long-standing concern about inconsistent developments of the same subject. 64 Macroeconomic analysis also considers factors affecting the long-term level and growth of national income. Such factors include capital accumulation, technological change, and labor force growth. 65 Growth. Main article: Economic growth. Growth economics studies factors that explain economic growth, the increase in output per capita of a country over a long period of time. The same factors are used to explain differences in the level of output per capita between countries, in particular why some countries grow faster than others, and whether countries converge at the same rates of growth. Much studied factors include the rate of investment, population growth, and technological change. These are represented in theoretical and empirical forms, as in the neoclassical and endogenous growth models, and in growth accounting. 66 Business cycle. Main article: Business cycle. See also, circular flow of income, aggregate supply, aggregate demand, and unemployment. A basic illustration of economics/business cycles. The economics of a depression were the spur for the creation of macroeconomics as a separate discipline field of study. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, John Maynard Keynes authored a book entitled The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, outlining the key theories of Keynesian economics. Keynes contended that aggregate demand for goods might be insufficient during economic downturns, leading to unnecessarily high unemployment and losses of potential output. He therefore advocated active policy responses by the public sector, including monetary policy actions by the central bank and fiscal policy actions by the government to stabilize output over the business cycle. 67 Thus, a central conclusion of Keynesian economics is that, in some situations, no strong automatic mechanism moves output and employment towards full employment levels. John Hicks's/LM model has been the most influential interpretation of the general theory. Over the years, understanding of the business cycle has branched into various research programs, mostly related to or distinct from Keynesianism. The neoclassical synthesis refers to the reconciliation of Keynesian economics with neoclassical economics, stating that Keynesianism is correct in the short run, but qualified by neoclassical-like considerations in the intermediate and long run. 68 New classical macroeconomics, as distinct from the Keynesian view of the business cycle, posits market clearing with imperfect information. It includes Friedman's permanent income hypothesis on consumption and rational expectations theory, 69, led by Robert Lucas, and real business cycle theory, 70. In contrast, the new Keynesian approach retains the rational expectations assumption, however it assumes a variety of market failures. In particular, new Keynesians assume prices and wages are sticky, which means they do not adjust instantaneously to changes in economic conditions. 71. Thus, the new classicals assume that prices and wages adjust automatically to attain full employment, whereas the new Keynesians see full employment as being automatically achieved only in the long run, and hence government and central bank policies are needed, because the long run may be very long. Unemployment. Main article: Unemployment. The percentage of the U.S. population employed, 1995 to 2012. The amount of unemployment in an economy is measured by the unemployment rate, the percentage of workers without jobs, in the labor force. The labor force only includes workers actively looking for jobs. People who are retired, pursuing education, or discouraged from seeking work by a lack of job prospects are excluded from the labor force. Unemployment can be generally broken down into several types that are related to different causes. 72. Classical models of unemployment occurs when wages are too high for employers to be willing to hire more workers. Wages may be too high because of minimum wage laws or union activity. Consistent with classical unemployment, Frictional unemployment occurs when appropriate job vacancies exist for a worker, but the length of time needed to search for and find the job leads to a period of unemployment. 72. Structural unemployment covers a variety of possible causes of unemployment, including a mismatch between workers' skills and the skills required for open jobs. 73. Large amounts of structural unemployment can occur when an economy is transitioning industries and workers find their previous set of skills are no longer in demand. Structural unemployment is similar to frictional unemployment, since both reflect the problem of matching workers with job vacancies, but structural unemployment covers the time needed to acquire new skills, not just the short-term search process. 74. While some types of unemployment may occur regardless of the condition of the economy, cyclical unemployment occurs when growth stagnates. Oken's law represents the empirical relationship between unemployment and economic growth. 75. The original version of Oken's law states that a 3% increase in output would lead to a 1% decrease in unemployment. 76. Inflation and monetary policy. Main articles: Inflation and monetary policy. See also, Money, Quantity Theory of Money, Monetary Policy and History of Money. Money is a means of final payment for goods in most price system economies, and a unit of account in which prices are typically stated. An apt statement by Francis Amasa Walker, a well-known economist, is, "Money is what money does." Citation needed. Money has a general acceptability, a relative consistency in value, divisibility, durability, portability, elastic in supply, and survives with mass public confidence. It includes currency held by the non-bank public and checkable deposits. It has been described as a social convention, like language, useful to one largely, because it is useful to others. As a medium of exchange, money facilitates trade. It is essentially a measure of value, and more importantly, a store of value, being a basis for credit creation. Its economic function can be contrasted with barter, non-monetary exchange. Given a diverse array of produced goods and specialized producers, barter may entail a hard-to-locate double coincidence of wants as to what is exchanged, say apples and a book. Money can reduce the transaction cost of exchange because of its ready acceptability. Then it is less costly for the seller to accept money in exchange, rather than what the buyer produces. 77. At the level of an economy, theory and evidence are consistent with the positive relationship running from the total money supply to the nominal value of total output, and to the general price level. For this reason, management of the money supply is a key aspect of monetary policy. 78. Fiscal policy. Main articles: Fiscal policy and government spending. Governments implement fiscal policy that influence macroeconomic conditions by adjusting spending and taxation policies to alter aggregate demand. When aggregate demand falls below the potential output of the economy, there is an output gap where some productive capacity is left unemployed. Governments increase spending and cut taxes to boost aggregate demand. Resources that have been idle can be used by the government. For example, unemployed home builders can be hired to expand highways. Tax cuts allow consumers to increase their spending, which boosts aggregate demand. Both tax cuts and spending have multiplier effects, where the initial increase in demand from the policy percolates through the economy and generates additional economic activity. The effects of fiscal policy can be limited by crowding out. When there is no output gap, the economy is producing at full capacity, and there are no excess productive resources. If the government increases spending in this situation, the government used resources that otherwise would have been used by the private sector, so there is no increase in overall output. Some economists think that crowding out is always an issue, while others do not think it is a major issue when output is depressed. Skeptics of fiscal policy also make the argument of Ricardian equivalence. They argue that an increase in debt will have to be paid for with future tax increases, which will cause people to reduce their consumption and save money to pay for the future tax increase. Under Ricardian equivalence, any boost in demand from fiscal policy will be offset by the increased savings rate intended to pay for future higher taxes. International economics. Main articles: International economics and economic system. List of countries by GDP, PPP, per capita in 2014. International trade studies determinants of goods and services flows across international boundaries. It also concerns the size and distribution of gains from trade. Policy applications include estimating the effects of changing tariff rates and trade quotas. International finance is a macroeconomic field which examines the flow of capital across international borders and the effects of these movements on exchange rates. Increased trade in goods, services, and capital between countries is a major effect of contemporary globalization. 79. The distinct field of development economics examines economic aspects of the economic development process in relatively low-income countries, focusing on structural change, poverty, and economic growth. Approaches in development economics frequently incorporate social and political factors. 80. Economic systems is the branch of economics that studies the methods and institutions by which societies determine the ownership, direction, and allocation of economic resources. An economic system of a society is the unit of analysis. Among contemporary systems at different ends of the organizational spectrum are socialist systems and capitalist systems, in which most production occurs in respectively state-run and private enterprises. In between are mixed economies. A common element is the interaction of economic and political influences, broadly described as political economy. Comparative economic systems studies the relative performance and behavior of different economies or systems. 81. The U.S. Export-Import Bank defines a Marxist-Leninist state as having a centrally planned economy. 82. They are now rare. Examples can still be seen in Cuba, North Korea, and Laos. 83 needs update. Practice. Main articles: Economic Methodology, Mathematical Economics, and Schools of Economics. Contemporary economics uses mathematics. Economists draw on the tools of calculus, linear algebra, statistics, game theory, and computer science. 84 professional economists are expected to be familiar with these tools, while a minority specialize in econometrics and mathematical methods. Theory. Mainstream economic theory relies upon a priori quantitative economic models, which employ a variety of concepts. Theory typically proceeds with an assumption of ceteris paribus, which means holding constant explanatory variables other than the one under consideration. When creating theories, the objective is to find ones which are at least as simple in information requirements, more precise in predictions, and more fruitful in generating additional research than prior theories. 85. In microeconomics, principal concepts include supply and demand, marginalism, rational choice theory, opportunity cost, budget constraints, utility, and the theory of the firm. 86-87 Early macroeconomic models focused on modeling the relationships between aggregate variables, but as the relationships appeared to change over time, macroeconomists, including new Keynesians, reformulated their models in Micro Foundation. 71. The aforementioned microeconomic concepts play a major part in macroeconomic models. For instance, in monetary theory, the quantity theory of money predicts that increases in the money supply increase inflation, and inflation is assumed to be influenced by rational expectations. In development economics, slower growth in developed nations has been sometimes predicted, the cause of the declining marginal returns of investment and capital, and this has been observed in the 4 Asian tigers. Sometimes an economic hypothesis is only qualitative, not quantitative. 88. Expositions of economic reasoning often use two-dimensional graphs to illustrate theoretical relationships. At a higher level of generality, Paul Samuelson's treatise Foundations of Economic Analysis, 1947, used mathematical methods to represent the theory, particularly as to maximizing behavioral relations of agents reaching equilibrium. The book focused on examining the class of statements called operationally meaningful theorems in economics, which are theorems that can conceivably be refuted by empirical data. 89. Empirical investigation. Main articles: Econometrics and Experimental Economics. Economic theories are frequently tested empirically, largely through the use of econometrics using economic data. 90. The controlled experiments common to the physical sciences are difficult and uncommon in economics. 91. And instead broad data is observationally studied. This type of testing is typically regarded as less rigorous than controlled experimentation, and the conclusions typically more tentative. However, the field of experimental economics is growing, and increasing use is being made of natural experiments. Statistical methods such as regression analysis are common. practitioners use such methods to estimate the size, economic significance, and statistical significance, signal strength of the hypothesized relation, S, and to adjust for noise from other variables. By such means, a hypothesis may gain acceptance, although in a probabilistic, rather than certain, sense. Acceptance is dependent upon the falsifiable hypothesis surviving tests. Use of commonly accepted methods need not produce a final conclusion, or even a consensus on a particular question, given different tests, datasets, and prior beliefs. Criticism based on professional standards and non-replicability of results serve as further checks against bias, errors, and overgeneralization. 8792 Although much economic research has been accused of being non-replicable, and prestigious journals have been accused of not facilitating replication through the provision of the code, and 8-93 like theories, uses of test statistics are themselves open to critical analysis. 94 Although critical commentary on papers in economics in prestigious journals such as the American Economic Review has declined precipitously in the past 40 years. This has been attributed to journals' incentives to maximize citations in order to rank higher on the Social Science Citation Index, SSCI, 95. In applied economics, input-output models employing linear programming methods are quite common. Large amounts of data are run through computer programs to analyze the impact of certain policies. Implan is one well-known example. Experimental economics has promoted the use of scientifically controlled experiments. This has reduced long-noted distinction of economics from natural sciences, allowed direct tests of what were previously taken as axioms. 96 In some cases these have found that the axioms are not entirely correct. For example, the ultimatum game has revealed that people reject unequal offers. In behavioral economics, psychologist Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002 for his and Amos Tversky's empirical discovery of several cognitive biases and heuristics. Similar empirical testing occurs in neuroeconomics. Another example is the assumption of narrowly selfish preferences versus a model that tests for selfish, altruistic, and cooperative preferences. 97 These techniques have led some to argue that economics is a genuine science. 98 Profession. Main article, Economist. The professionalization of economics, reflected in the growth of graduate programs on the subject, has been described as the main change in economics since around 1999. Most major universities and many colleges have a major, school, or department in which academic degrees are awarded in the subject, whether in the liberal arts, business, or for professional study. In the private sector, professional economists are employed as consultants and in industry, including banking and finance. Economists also work for various government departments and agencies, for example, the National Treasury, Central Bank, or Bureau of Statistics. The Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences, commonly known as the Nobel Prize in Economics, is a prize awarded to economists each year for outstanding intellectual contributions in the field. Related subjects. Main articles, Law and Economics, Natural Resource Economics, Philosophy and Economics, and Political Economy. Economics is one social science among several and has fields bordering on other areas, including economic geography, economic history, public choice, energy economics, cultural economics, family economics, and institutional economics. Law and economics, or economic analysis of law, is an approach to legal theory that applies methods of economics to law. It includes the use of economic concepts to explain the effects of legal rules, to assess which legal rules are economically efficient, and to predict what the legal rules will be. 100 A seminal article by Ronald Coase published in 1961 suggested that well-defined property rights could overcome the problems of externalities. 101 Political economy is the interdisciplinary study that combines economics, law, and political science in explaining how political institutions, the political environment, and the economic system, capitalist, socialist, mixed, influence each other. It studies questions such as how monopoly, rent-seeking behavior, and externalities should impact government policy. 102 Historians have employed political economy to explore the ways in the past that persons and groups with common economic interests have used politics to effect changes beneficial to their interests. 103 Energy economics is a broad scientific subject area which includes topics related to energy supply and energy demand. George Skirogan reintroduced the concept of entropy in relation to economics and energy from thermodynamics, as distinguished from what he viewed as the mechanistic foundation of neoclassical economics drawn from Newtonian physics. His work contributed significantly to thermoeconomics and to ecological economics. He also did foundational work which later developed into evolutionary economics 104. The sociological subfield of economics sociology arose, primarily through the work of Emile Durkheim, Max Weber, and George Simmel, as an approach to analyzing the effects of economic phenomena in relation to the overarching social paradigm, i.e. modernity. 105 classic works include Max Weber's The Protestant Ethic and The Spirit of Capitalism, 1905, and George Simmel's The Philosophy of Money, 1900. More recently, the works of Mark Granovetter, Peter Hedstrom, and Richard Swedberg have been influential in this field. History. Main articles: History of Economic Thought and History of Macroeconomic Thought. Economic writings date from earlier Mesopotamian, Greek, Roman, Indian subcontinent, Chinese, Persian, and Arab civilizations. Notable writers from antiquity through to the 14th century include Aristotle, Xenophon, Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, Qin Huang, Thomas Aquinas, and Ibn Khaldun. Joseph Schumpeter described Aquinas as coming nearer than any other group to being the founders of scientific economics as to monetary, interest, and value theory within the natural law perspective. 106 not in citation given. A seaport with a ship arriving. A 1638 painting of a French seaport during the heyday of mercantilism. Two groups, later called mercantilists and physiocrats, more directly influenced the subsequent development of the subject. Both groups were associated with the rise of economic nationalism and modern capitalism in Europe. Mercantilism was an economic doctrine that flourished from the 16th to 18th century in a prolific pamphlet literature, whether of merchants or statesmen. It held that a nation's wealth depended on its accumulation of gold and silver. Nations without access to mines could obtain gold and silver from trade only by selling goods abroad and restricting imports other than of gold and silver. The doctrine called for importing cheap raw materials to be used in manufacturing goods, which could be exported, and for state regulation to impose protective tariffs on foreign manufactured goods and prohibit manufacturing in the colonies. 107. Physiocrats, a group of 18th century French thinkers and writers, developed the idea of the economy as a circular flow of income and output. Physiocrats believed that only agricultural production generated a clear surplus over cost, so that agriculture was the basis of all wealth. Thus, they opposed the mercantilist policy of promoting manufacturing and trade at the expense of agriculture, including import tariffs. Physiocrats advocated replacing administratively costly tax collections with a single tax on income of landowners. In reaction against copious mercantilist trade regulations, the physiocrats advocated a policy of laissez-faire, which called for minimal government intervention in the economy. 108. Adam Smith, 1723–1790, was an early economic theorist. 109. Smith was harshly critical of the mercantilists, but described the physiocratic system with all its imperfections as perhaps the purest approximation to the truth that has yet been published on the subject. 110. Classical political economy. Main article: Classical economics. A man facing the right. The publication of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations in 1776 is considered to be the first formalization of economic thought. The publication of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations in 1776 has been described as the effective birth of economics as a separate discipline. 111. The book identified land, labor, and capital as the three factors of production and the major contributors to a nation's wealth, as distinct from the physiocratic idea that only agriculture was productive. Smith discusses potential benefits of specialization by division of labor, including increased labor productivity and gains from trade, whether between town and country or across countries. 112. His theorem, That the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market has been described as the Korova theory of the functions of firm and industry, and a fundamental principle of economic organization. 113. To Smith has also been ascribed the most important substantive proposition in all of economics and foundation of resource allocation theory, that, under competition, resource owners of labor, land, and capital seek their most profitable uses, resulting in an equal rate of return for all uses in equilibrium, adjusted for apparent differences arising from such factors as training and unemployment. 114. In an argument that includes one of the most famous passages in all economics, 115, Smith represents every individual as trying to employ any capital they might demand for their own advantage, not that of the society. 116, and for the sake of profit, which is necessary at some level for employing capital in domestic industry, and positively related to the value of produce. 117. In this, he generally, indeed, neither intends to promote the public interest, nor knows how much he is promoting it. By preferring the support of domestic to that of foreign industry, he intends only his own security, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand, to promote an end which was no part of his intention. Nor is it always the worse for the society that it was no part of it. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. 118. Economists have linked Smith's invisible hand concept to his concern for the common man and woman through economic growth and development. 119. Enabling higher levels of consumption, which Smith describes as the sole end purpose of all production. 120-121. He embeds the invisible hand in a framework that includes limiting restrictions on competition and foreign trade by government and industry in the same chapter. 122, and elsewhere regulation of banking and the interest rate. 123. Provision of a natural system of liberty, national defense, an egalitarian justice and legal system, and certain institutions and public works with general benefits to the whole society that might otherwise be unprofitable to produce, such as education. 124. And roads, canals, and the like. 125. 126. An influential introductory textbook includes parallel discussion and this assessment, above all. It is Adam Smith's vision of a self-regulating invisible hand that is his enduring contribution to modern economics. 127. The Reverend Thomas Robert Malthus, 1798, used the idea of diminishing returns to explain low living standards. Human population, he argued, tended to increase geometrically, outstripping the production of food, which increased arithmetically. The force of rapidly growing population against a limited amount of land meant diminishing returns to labor. The result, he claimed, was chronically low wages, which prevented the standard of living for most of the population from rising above the subsistence level. 128. Economist Julian Lincoln Simon has criticized Malthus's conclusions. 129. While Adam Smith emphasized the production of income, David Ricardo, 1817, focused on the distribution of income among landowners, workers, and capitalists. Ricardo saw an inherent conflict between landowners on the one hand and labor and capital on the other. He posited that the growth of population and capital, pressing against a fixed supply of land, pushes up rents and holds down wages and profits. Ricardo was the first to state and prove the principle of comparative advantage, according to which each country should specialize in producing and exporting goods, in that it has a lower relative cost of production, rather relying only on its own production. 130. It has been termed a fundamental analytical explanation for gains from trade. 131. Coming at the end of the classical tradition, John Stuart Mill, 1848, parted company with the earlier classical economists on the inevitability of the distribution of income produced by the market system. Mill pointed to a distinct difference between the market's two roles, or
finance. From Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. For the board game, see finance, game. Financial, redirects here. For the Caucasian newspaper, see financial. This article needs additional citations for verification. Please help improve this article by adding citations to reliable sources. Unsourced material may be challenged and removed. July 2013, Finance. CDs volume outstanding.png. markets. Show, instruments. Show, corporate. Show, personal. Show, public. Show, banks and banking. Show, regulation, standards. Show, economic history. Show. VTE. Finance is a field that deals with assets and liabilities over time under conditions of certainty and uncertainty. Finance can also be defined as the science of money management. A key point in finance is the time value of money, which states that purchasing power of one unit of currency can vary over time. Finance aims to price assets based on their risk level and their expected rate of return. Finance can be broken into three different subcategories: public finance, corporate finance and personal finance. Contents. 1. Areas of finance. 1.1 Personal finance. 1.2 Corporate finance. 1.2.1 Financial services. 1.3 Public finance. 2 Capital. 3 Financial theory. 3.1 Financial economics. 3.2 Financial mathematics. 3.3 Experimental finance. 3.4 Behavioral finance. 3.5 Intangible asset finance. 4 Professional qualifications. 5 See also. 6 References. 7 External links. Areas of finance. London Stock Exchange, Global Center of Finance. Wall Street, the center of American finance. Personal finance. Main article, Personal finance. Questions in personal finance revolve around protection against unforeseen personal events, as well as events in the wider economy. Transference of family across generations, bequests and inheritance, effects of tax policies, tax subsidies and/or penalties, on management of personal finances. Effects of credit on individual financial standing. Development of a savings plan or financing for large purchases, auto, education, home, planning a secure financial future in an environment of economic instability. Personal finance may involve paying for education, financing durable goods such as real estate and cars, buying insurance, for example health and property insurance, investing and saving for retirement. Personal finance may also involve paying for a loan or debt obligations. The 6 key areas of personal financial planning, as suggested by the Financial Planning Standards Board, are 1. Financial position is concerned with understanding the personal resources available by examining net worth and household cash flow. Net worth is a person's balance sheet, calculated by adding up all assets under that person's control, minus all liabilities of the household, at one point in time. Household cash flow totals up all the expected sources of income within a year, minus all expected expenses within the same year. From this analysis, the financial planner can determine to what degree and in what time the personal goals can be accomplished. Adequate protection. The analysis of how to protect a household from unforeseen risks. These risks can be divided into liability, property, death, disability, health and long-term care. Some of these risks may be self-insurable, while most will require the purchase of an insurance contract. Determining how much insurance to get at the most cost-effective terms requires knowledge of the market for personal insurance. Business owners, professionals, athletes and entertainers require specialized insurance professionals to adequately protect themselves. Since insurance also enjoys some tax benefits, utilizing insurance investment products may be a critical piece of the overall investment planning. Tax planning. Typically, the income tax is the single largest expense in a household. Managing taxes is not a question of if you will pay taxes, but when and how much. Government gives many incentives in the form of tax deductions and credits, which can be used to reduce the lifetime tax burden. Most modern governments use a progressive tax. Typically, as one's income grows, a higher marginal rate of tax must be paid. Understanding how to take advantage of the myriad tax breaks when planning one's personal finances can make a significant impact in which it can later save you money in the long term. Investment and accumulation goals. Planning how to accumulate enough money, for large purchases and life events, is what most people consider to be financial planning. Major reasons to accumulate assets include purchasing a house or car, starting a business, paying for education expenses, and saving for retirement. Achieving these goals requires projecting what they will cost, and when you need to withdraw funds that will be necessary to be able to achieve these goals. A major risk to the household in achieving their accumulation goal is the rate of price increases over time, or inflation. Using net present value calculators, the financial planner will suggest a combination of asset earmarking and regular savings to be invested in a variety of investments. In order to overcome the rate of inflation, the investment portfolio has to get a higher rate of return, which typically will subject the portfolio to a number of risks. Managing these portfolio risks is most often accomplished using asset allocation, which seeks to diversify investment risk and opportunity. This asset allocation will prescribe a percentage allocation to be invested in stocks, either preferred stock and/or common stock, bonds, for example mutual bonds or government bonds, or corporate bonds, cash and alternative investments. The allocation should also take into consideration the personal risk profile of every investor, since risk attitudes vary from person to person. Retirement planning is the process of understanding how much it costs to live at retirement, and coming up with a plan to distribute assets to meet any income shortfall. Methods for retirement plan include taking advantage of government-allowed structures to manage tax liability, including individual, IRA, structures, or employer-sponsored retirement plans. Estate planning involves planning for the disposition of one's assets after death. Typically, there is a tax due to the state or federal government at one's death. Avoiding these taxes means that more of one's assets will be distributed to one's heirs. One can leave one's assets to family, friends, or charitable groups. Corporate finance. Main article, Corporate finance. Corporate finance deals with the sources of funding and the capital structure of corporations and the actions that managers take to increase the value of the firm to the shareholders, as well as the tools and analysis used to allocate financial resources. Although it is in principle different from managerial finance, which studies the financial management of all firms, rather than corporations alone, the main concepts in the study of corporate finance are applicable to the financial problems of all kinds of firms. Corporate finance generally involves balancing risk and profitability, while attempting to maximize an entity's wealth and the value of its stock, and generically entails three primary areas of capital resource allocation. In the first, capital budgeting, management must choose which projects, if any, to undertake. The discipline of capital budgeting may employ standard business valuation techniques or even extend to real options valuation. See financial modeling. The second, sources of capital, relates to how these investments are to be funded. Investment capital can be provided through different sources, such as by shareholders, in the form of equity, privately or via an initial public offering, creditors, often in the form of bonds, and the firm's operations, cash flow. Short-term funding or working capital is mostly provided by banks extending a line of credit. The balance between these elements forms the company's capital structure. The third, the dividend policy, requires management to determine whether any unappropriated profit, excess cash, is to be retained for future investment/operational requirements, or instead to be distributed to shareholders, and if so, in what form. Short-term financial management is often termed working capital management, and relates to cash, inventory and debtors management. Corporate finance also includes within its scope business valuation, stock investing, or investment management. An investment is an acquisition of an asset in the hope that it will maintain or increase its value over time, that will in hope give back a higher rate of return when it comes to disbursing dividends. In investment management, in choosing a portfolio, one has to use financial analysis to determine what, how much and when to invest. To do this, a company must identify relevant objectives and constraints, institution or individual goals, time horizon, risk aversion and tax considerations, identify the appropriate strategy, active versus passive hedging strategy, measure the portfolio performance, Financial management overlaps with the financial function of the accounting profession. However, financial accounting is the reporting of historical financial information, while financial management is concerned with the allocation of capital resources to increase a firm's value to the shareholders and increase their rate of return on the investments. Financial risk management, an element of corporate finance, is the practice of creating and protecting economic value in a firm by using financial instruments to manage exposure to risk, particularly credit risk and market risk. Other risk types include foreign exchange, shape, volatility, sector, liquidity, inflation risks, etc. It focuses on when and how to hedge using financial instruments. In this sense, it overlaps with financial engineering. Similar to general risk management, financial risk management requires identifying its sources, measuring it, see, risk measure, well-known risk measures, and formulating plans to address these, and can be qualitative and quantitative. In the banking sector worldwide, the Basel Accords are generally adopted by internationally active banks for tracking, reporting and exposing operational, credit and market risks. Financial services. Main article, Financial services. An entity whose income exceeds its expenditure can lend or invest the excess income to help that excess income produce more income in the future. Though on the other hand, an entity whose income is less than its expenditure can raise capital by borrowing or selling equity claims, decreasing its expenses, or increasing its income. The lender can find a borrower of financial intermediaries such as a bank or buy notes or bonds, corporate bonds, government bonds, or mutual bonds, in the bond market. The lender receives interest, the borrower pays a higher interest than the lender receives, and the financial intermediary earns the difference for arranging the loan. A bank aggregates the activities of many borrowers and lenders. A bank accepts deposits from lenders, on which it pays interest. The bank then lends these deposits to borrowers. Banks allow borrowers and lenders, of different sizes, to coordinate their activity. Finance is used by individuals, personal finance, by governments, public finance, by businesses, corporate finance, and by a wide variety of other organizations such as including schools and non-profit organizations. In general, the goals of each of the above activities are achieved through the use of appropriate financial instruments and methodologies, with consideration to their institutional setting. Finance is one of the most important aspects of business management and includes analysis related to the use and acquisition of funds for the enterprise. In corporate finance, a company's capital structure is a total mix of financing methods it uses to raise funds. One method is debt financing, which includes bank loans and bond sales. Another method is equity financing, the sale of stock by a company to investors, the original shareholders. They own a portion of the business, of a share. Ownership of a share gives the shareholder certain contractual rights and powers, which typically include the right to receive declared dividends and to vote the proxy on important matters, for example, board elections. The owners of both bonds, either government bonds or corporate bonds, and stock, whether it's preferred stock or common stock, may be institutional investors, financial institutions such as investment banks and pension funds, or private individuals, called private investors or retail investors. Public finance. Main article, Public finance. Public finance describes finances related to sovereign states and subnational entities, states/provinces, counties, municipalities, etc., and related public entities, for example school districts, or agencies. It usually encompasses a long-term, strategic perspective regarding investment decisions that affect public entities. 2. These long-term, strategic periods usually encompass 5 or more years. 3. Public finance is primarily concerned with identification of required expenditure of a public sector entity, source, S, of that entity's revenue, the budgeting process, debt issuance, municipal bonds, for public works projects. Central banks, such as the Federal Reserve System banks in the United States and Bank of England in the United Kingdom, are strong players in public finance, acting as lenders of last resort as well as strong influences on monetary and credit conditions in the economy. 4. Capital. Main article, financial capital. Capital, in the financial sense, is the money that gives the business the power to buy goods to be used in the production of other goods or the offering of a service. The capital has two types of resources, equity and debt. The deployment of capital is decided by the budget. This may include the objective of business, targets set, and results in financial terms, for example, the target set for a sale, resulting cost, growth, required investment to achieve the planned sales, and financing source for the investment. A budget may be long-term or short-term. Long-term budgets have a time horizon of 5-10 years, giving a vision to the company. Short-term is an annual budget which is drawn to control and operate in the particular year. Budgets will include proposed fixed asset requirements and how these expenditures will be financed. Capital budgets are often adjusted annually, done every year, and should be part of a longer-term capital improvements plan. A cash budget is also required. The working capital requirements of a business are monitored at all times to ensure that there are sufficient funds available to meet short-term expenses. The cash budget is basically a detailed plan that shows all expected sources and uses of cash when it comes to spending it appropriately. The cash budget has the following 6 main sections. Beginning cash balance contains the last period's closing cash balance, in other words, the remaining cash from last year's earnings. Cash collections includes all expected cash receipts, all sources of cash for the period considered, mainly sales. Cash disbursements lists all planned cash outflows for the period, such as dividend, excluding interest payments on short-term loans, which appear in the financing section. All expenses that do not affect cash flow are excluded from this list, for example, depreciation, amortization, etc. Cash excess or deficiency, a function of the cash needs and cash available. Cash needs are determined by the total cash disbursements plus the minimum cash balance required by company policy. If total cash available is less than cash needs, a deficiency exists. Financing discloses the planned borrowings and repayments of those planned borrowings, including interest. Financial theory. Financial economics. Main article, Financial economics. Financial economics is the branch of economics studying the interrelation of financial variables, such as prices, interest rates and shares, as opposed to goods and services. Financial economics concentrates on influences of real economic variables on financial ones, in contrast to pure finance. It centers on managing risk in the context of the financial markets and the resultant economic and financial models. It essentially explores how rational investors would apply risk and return to the problem of an investment policy. Here, the twin assumptions of rationality and market efficiency lead to modern portfolio theory, the Kaplan, and to the Black-Scholes theory for option valuation. It further studies phenomena and models where these assumptions do not hold, or are extended. Financial economics, at least formally, also considers investment under certainty. Fisher separation theorem, theory of investment value, Modigliani-Miller theorem, and hence also contributes to corporate finance theory. Financial econometrics is the branch of financial economics that uses econometric techniques to parameterize the relationships suggested. Although closely related, the disciplines of economics and finance are distinctive. The economy is a social institution that organizes a society as production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services, all of which must be financed. Economists make a number of abstract assumptions for purposes of their analyses and predictions. They generally regard financial markets that function for the financial system as an efficient mechanism, efficient market hypothesis. Instead, financial markets are subject to human error and emotion. 5. New research discloses the mischaracterization of investment safety and measures of financial products and markets so complex that their effects, especially under conditions of uncertainty, are impossible to predict. The study of finance is subsumed under economics as financial economics, but the scope, speed, power relations and practices of the financial system can uplift or cripple whole economies and the well-being of households, businesses and governing bodies within them, sometimes in a single day. Financial mathematics. Main article: Financial mathematics. Financial mathematics is a field of applied mathematics concerned with financial markets. The subject has a close relationship with the discipline of financial economics, which is concerned with much of the underlying theory that is involved in financial mathematics. Generally, mathematical finance will derive and extend the mathematical or numerical models suggested by financial economics. In terms of practice, mathematical finance also overlaps heavily with the field of computational finance, also known as financial engineering. Arguably, these are largely synonymous, although the latter focuses on application, while the former focuses on modeling and derivation. See quantitative analyst. The field is largely focused on the modeling of derivatives, although other important subfields include insurance mathematics and quantitative portfolio problems. See outline of finance, mathematical tools, outline of finance, derivatives pricing. Experimental finance. Main article: Experimental finance. Experimental finance aims to establish different market settings and environments to observe experimentally and provide a lens through which science can analyze agents' behavior and the resulting characteristics of trading flows, information diffusion and aggregation, price-setting mechanisms, and returns processes. Researchers in experimental finance can study to what extent existing financial economics theory makes valid predictions and therefore prove them, and attempt to discover new principles on which such theory can be extended and be applied to future financial decisions. Research may proceed by conducting trading simulations or by establishing and studying the behavior and the way that these people act or react of people in artificial competitive market-like settings. Behavioral finance. Main article: Behavioral economics. Behavioral finance studies how the psychology of investors or managers affects financial decisions and markets when making a decision that can impact either negatively or positively on one of their areas. Behavioral finance has grown over the last few decades to become central and very important to finance. Citation needed. Behavioral finance includes such topics as empirical studies that demonstrate significant deviations from classical theories, models of how psychology affects and impacts trading and prices, forecasting based on these methods, studies of experimental asset markets and use of models to forecast experiments. A strand of behavioral finance has been dubbed quantitative behavioral finance, which uses mathematical and statistical methodology to understand behavioral biases in conjunction with valuation. Some of this endeavor has been led by Gunduska Janel, professor of mathematics and editor of Journal of Behavioral Finance during 2001 to 2004, and collaborators including Vernon Smith, 2002 Nobel laureate in economics, David Porter, Dan Belenovich, Vladimir Ilyeva, Ahmed Duran. Studies by Jeff Maturon, Ray Sturm and others have demonstrated significant behavioral effects in stocks and exchange-traded funds. Among other topics, quantitative behavioral finance studies behavioral effects together with the non-classical assumption of the finiteness of assets. Intangible asset finance. Main article: Intangible asset finance. Intangible asset finance is the area of finance that deals with intangible assets such as patents, trademarks, goodwill, reputation, etc. Professional qualifications. There are several related professional qualifications that can lead to the field. Generalist finance qualifications, degrees, Master of Science in Finance, MSF, Master of Finance, M.Fin, Master of Financial Economics, Master of Applied Finance. Certifications: Chartered Financial Analyst, CFA, Certified Treasury Professional, CTP, Certified Valuation Analyst, CVA, Certified Patent Valuation Analyst, CVA, Chartered Business Valuator, CBV, Certified International Investment Analyst, CIA, Financial Risk Manager, from Professional Risk Manager, PRM, Association of Corporate Treasurers, ACT, Certified Market Analyst, CMA/FAD, dual designation, corporate finance qualification, CF, Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst, CAIA, Chartered Investment Manager, SIME, quantitative finance qualifications, Master of Financial Engineering, MSFE, Master of Quantitative Finance, MQF, Master of Computational Finance, MCF, Master of Financial Mathematics, MFM, Certificate in Quantitative Finance, CQF. Accountancy qualifications, Qualified Accountant, Chartered Accountant, the Institute of Chartered Accountant of Pakistan, ICAP, Chartered Accountant, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, ICAI, Chartered Accountant, ACA, UK Certification/California, Certification in Commonwealth Countries, Chartered Certified Accountant, ACA, UK Certification, Certified Public Accountant, FA, US Certification, ACMA/FCMA, Associate/Fellow Chartered Management Accountant, from Chartered Institute of Management Accountant, CIMA, UK. Non-statutory qualifications, Chartered Cost Accountant designation from IAFM. Business qualifications, Master of Business Administration, MBA, Master of Management, Millimeters, Master of Commerce, M.Com, Master of Science and Management, MSM, Doctor of Business Administration, BA. See also. Outline of Finance. Financial Crisis of 2007-2010. Book icon. Book. Finance. References. Financial Planning Curriculum Framework. Financial Planning Standards Board. 2011. Retrieved 7 April 2012. Doss, Daniel, Sumrall, William, Jones, Don, 2012. Strategic Finance for Criminal Justice Organizations, First ed. Boca Raton, Florida, CRC Press. p. 23. ISB 978-1,439,892,237. Doss, Daniel, Sumrall, William, Jones, Don, 2012. Strategic Finance for Criminal Justice Organizations, First ed. Boca Raton, Florida, CRC Press. Pages 53, 54. ISB 978-1,439,892,237. Board of Governors of Federal Reserve System of the United States. Mission of the Federal Reserve System. Federal Reserve. Governor accessed, 2010-1-16. Archived by website at webcitation.org. Berezin, M. 2005. Emotions and the Economy, in Smelser, New Jersey, and R. Swedberg, eds. The Handbook of Economic Sociology, 2nd edition. Princeton University Press, Princeton, New Jersey. External links. Look up Finance and Wiktionary, the Free Dictionary. Wikiquote has quotations related to finance. Wikisource has the text of the 1921 Collier's Encyclopedia article Finance. Learn finance step by step with infographics tools. OECD work on financial markets observation of UK finance market. Wharton Finance Knowledge Project, aimed to offer free access to finance knowledge for students, teachers, and self-learners. Professor Aswath Madaran, New York University Stern School of Business, provides resources covering 3 areas in finance: corporate finance, valuation and investment management, and syndicate finance. Hyde. VTE. General areas of finance: computational finance, experimental finance, financial economics, financial institutions, financial markets, investment management, mathematical finance, personal finance, public finance, quantitative behavioral finance, quantum finance, statistical finance.